there's this idea that white people look at us like animals in cages, and their curiosity is no different than you going to the San Diego Zoo.
Can't I want to know somebody who's different than me and be excited about it? Maybe it'll work out and we could be friends, and maybe not. But what's wrong with that?
And I said, no, this is my natural hair. And she said, can I touch it? I'm pretty sure most people don't go up to a white person and say, can I touch your hair? And I told her, I said, when I was in the Army, I had a friend whose parents, they were from Indiana, and she grew up in just predominantly white neighborhood, white friends. She just, didn't understand anything outside of her community. We got to be really good friends. We were bunkmates, so we got to be really good friends. And her parents came up for graduation. And she told me, she said, I just want you to know my parents are racist. And I said, so you want me to come around? And she's like, yeah, because they need to see that not every Black person is what they see on the news, because the news tends to present only this negative view. They need to know. And I said, okay, I'm up for it. So her parents come down. And when she introduced me, they initially looked at me like, And I was talking, to her mom, who was actually in the medical field. And I read a lot. I'm a reader. So I've read medical books, law books, just whatever interests me at that particular time. I read. And so her mom was talking about this, and I'm like, oh, yeah, so we had this conversation. And her mom kind of, you could just tell it was just coming down. So her mom says, we're going to go to Atlantic City, for the weekend. Would you like to come? And I said, sure, I've never been to Atlantic City.
So these seemingly racist people invited you on their family vacation?
Yes, they did. Yes, they did. So I go to Atlantic City, and the next day we went swimming. And when I was in the Army, I had my hair straightened and back in a bun. So my hair, you can tell, is naturally curly. So I jump in the water with straight hair and I come up like this. And her mom at this point, she's feeling comfortable with me. She said, oh, you have a perm. And I laughed because, again, when a white person gets a perm, it makes their hair go curly. A Black person's perm makes their hair go straight. And I said, no, this is my natural hair. And she said, can I touch it? And that is typically an affront, to a Black person. I'm pretty sure most people don't go up to a white person and say, can I touch your hair? And I told her, I said, sure, can I touch yours? And she, she kind of looked a little bit, but then she got what I was saying. Like, you see how weird that really is? Yeah. And so she reaches over and she touches and she said, oh my God, it's so soft. And I touched hers and I said, you need to lay off the product. It's making your hair dry, and she's like, again, but I use humor a lot to educate. And I said, Mrs. Vaughn, do you ever ask your white friends, can you touch their hair? And she said, no. And I said, then why did you ask me? And she's like, well, your hair is different. And I said, different than what?
Yeah.
And I know she really thought about that. When they left, she invited me to the house. She's like, you can come down to Indiana anytime. You can stay with us. And, because again, it was a safe, comfortable space. And like I said, I use humor a lot to explain things, but not everybody has my upbringing. Not everybody has had my experiences. So a little bit different.
And I wanted to say, I personally want to thank you for being willing to go beyond your comfort zone and to be in that experience. Because a lot of people just would have shut down. They would not have wanted to be around the family, but you opened yourself up. So the antithesis of self-segregation, right? In order, number one, to get to know your friend better, because she clearly wanted you to meet her family. But number two, where you saw the opportunity to elevate, you did.
When I was in the 5th grade, I was very close to my teacher, and my teacher's family, who happened to be white, Jewish, and had money. That was different to see, but I was told, if this is the life you want, you can have that. And so I just never felt like I couldn't be what I wanted to be. Now, I've absolutely had instances of racism as well. But I choose, and it is a choice, I choose to do different. My friend groups, I've got friends of, every nationality. Sometimes I do cultural things with them. And it continues to open me and grow me, and being with me is a safe space.
Can I ask a question related to the self-segregation, because we're on the topic, and I'm asking the question because I really want to learn something, maybe even get some advice. I am in a church here that is, I'd say, about 70-80% white. There's a smattering of Asian, and then, maybe a few people of color, other colors. Our choir director is African American, and he comes a long time ago from a very large, very influential, predominantly Black church in Los Angeles. And we are invited to sing with their choir. They're invited to sing with us. So that's the interaction that happens between the two groups. I go there, and probably 70, 80, maybe 90% of the people are African American. And so some of them will come and be in the audience when their choir members are performing or singing with us. A lot of us will go there, but we don't go beyond the practices, the rehearsals, and the singing together. And so sometimes it'll be maybe 6 months to a year between seeing these folks, and I can't even remember their names sometimes. How in the world do we break down that self-segregation that just occurs just because of comfort level? Just because, you don't necessarily, I have friends in the congregation. Our keyboardist is African American. She's a dear friend. She's given concerts in my home. We go out together. And so there's no hesitation on my part, except for maybe a little bit of discomfort when I'm in a group of people that I don't know and they know each other really well. I'm shy. I don't go out of my way to make conversation with them and, share personal things. What do you think? Can I do, or could we do as a group to make that better?
Michelle and Felicia, what are your thoughts?
For me, I think the key word is comfort. Most of us stick within our comfort zone, but if you want change, you have to step outside of your comfort zone. And that could be something as simple as walking over, hi, my name is Marietta. I'm an alto. What is it? What voice do you sing in, or what have you? Obviously, I'm not musical, but something like that. And so you're looking for the common ground. And you find that, and then you'd be shocked how many things. I talk to people like I don't know all the time. And rarely do I have a negative experience. And I usually talk to people who look like they don't want to talk to me, because I like a challenge.
Because I've been told I have a stank face. I'm like, so Marietta would see me like, oh, turn around, because he don't look friendly.
And see, you would be the kind of person that I would walk up to and say, really, is it that bad? And that's what happens.
And I'm like,
People
girl, no, I just don't
smile.
feel like being bothered.
You know, and again, but that conversation starts.
Yeah.
You know, I've done that so many times. And just, you know, like Felicia said, everybody wants to be accepted. You know, everybody wants to be loved. That's the commonality in all of us. I don't care what race you are, what sex you are, you know, whatever. That's the commonality. So you find that.
Yeah.
Again, I've been in the airport, you know, where I saw this guy and he was just looking all mean. It's like tall white guy with a what you call it?
Bandana?
No, the hat, the cowboy
Sombrero?
hat.
No, cowboy hat.
Cowboy hat, cowboy boots on, you know, had his jeans on with the big belt buckle and, you know, that kind of stuff. And he's just kind of looking, standing off, you know, from everybody else. And you know me, I'm just laughing. So I walk up to him and I said, I like that belt buckle. How much you pay for that? And he's like, looked at me and I said, no, seriously. I said, I'm originally from the South. I love the ornateness of it. Did you make that or have that made? And he's like, well, and he starts telling me, you know, the story. And we talked until we got on the plane. But I guarantee you, this man would have never, ever spoken to me. No, it's, you know, he looked like the stereotypical Texas, you know, racist, 100%. That's how he looked. But, you know, I'm going to make you talk to me.
Well, I'm not as
yeah.
I'm not as socially adept as Michelle is, clearly. What I will add is, you know, it seems like, you know, you had a whole path, Marietta, to come to be doing what you're doing with the choir with regard to music.
Mhm.
So have they, right? They have a whole path. And so you have so much probably to share, you know, how long you've been singing for, how did you get started? You know, how did you find yourself singing with this choir? Whatever it might be, you know, I like to get people to tell stories, right? And the more, as Michelle said, you know, there's kind of common overlapping stories because you are in, you know, in a musical setting together, the more that I think you'll be able to relate to those stories and tell your own story. And I can just share from, you know, listen, Andre and I were stuck together for 9 months. We became college freshman roommates, right? But I can tell you, you know, I don't even know, Andre, you probably remember the story better than I do, but he shared very early on in our first conversation about his feelings of how he felt being there at college and vis-a-vis how he was interacting with his mom, who was also there, right? And his openness and his willingness to tell a story, a story that I could relate to. And I'll just right away, I was like, this is my kind of friend, you know, this is like, we're going to get along well. But it was him telling some kind of story, letting me into something about his human self that broke all the ice and got us moving forward. Andre,
But I do want to point out, not about me, but I want to point out about Black people, because I come from a home where we were told, don't you talk what's going on in my house. Or else you get your ass.
That what?
And I wasn't one that took an ass whooping. So when my mama said, keep your mouth closed, my lips was zipped. So when I hear talk about stories, that is all well and good, but to the extent you've been inculcated to be comfortable talking and discussing yourself, right? And a lot of Black people, number one, so many dimensions of our identity have played out in such public ways that we feel that a lot of white people should know what at least part of our story is. And I was going to ask Marietta, is there any sort of intimidation or a fear factor she may feel approaching a Black person in a group versus a Black person individually? But also when it comes to a lot of Black-white relations, especially where we are in these times, to kind of echo Felicia, you know, some Black people just don't want to hear it because they feel the relationship is so fraught, it's almost never to be repaired.
So something I just want to add for you, Marietta, because it's fine and dandy to tell you, oh, just talk to them. They won't bite you or all that stuff. But I want to recognize the humanness of shyness. That's a human thing. We all have different times where we're shy. Even me as an extrovert, there are times, certain social situations where I withdraw, that I have fear. And I recognize that. That's why I'm single. But in that, I want you two things, because we're talking about church. We're talking about where you're supposed to come as you are. We're talking about a theology idea that we're all under one body, we're all one. And so what I would suggest, and you can take this with a grain of salt, that one, when you know that you're going into this space, I would say a quick prayer of, Lord, whoever is supposed to come into my life and whoever I'm supposed to touch, whoever I'm supposed to show up as you in front of, bring that person into me and help me be open and help me with the words to say, to touch that heart and mind as you see fit. Like that would be my prayer. If I truly have a heart that wants to have this experience, I would ask God to bring it to me under his command, number one. But number two, I think in a very earthly way, because that's the spiritual way. In a very earthly way, something that I have always been taught, and something that I think we forget when we get nervous, is to stay intellectually curious. So it's one thing for Todd to say, oh, well, ask their story, but why are you asking them their story? Right. So you have to know your internal why. And so part of that is because no matter how uncomfortable I am, I'm still curious about this other human being, and my spirit is drawn to them. And so I want to know them. I want to see them as I see myself. And if you can get your brain in that space, even when it gets uncomfortable, you can remind yourself, it doesn't matter how comfortable I am, because this is another human being and I want to connect on a very human level. Yeah. And so we all need to do that. But I think if we can frame it that way for ourselves, especially if we're at church, then I think that might be helpful.
I think that's so, yeah. I mean, that hits me, Felicia. Also, Andre and I were talking, when we were having our conversation, Andre asked me, what did you think when a Black male walked into your, college freshman, room, as your roommate? And I told him, from what I remember, back then, I felt more than anxious. I felt excited. And he said to me, I could take that in two ways. And I knew exactly what was coming, right? Which is like, am I just an object for your curiosity because I'm a Black man, And I get that. And so I feel like people, my guess about Michelle, because I know Michelle was not wanting to know that, to strike a conversation with that guy with the belt buckle just to like prove a point, right?
No, she loves people. Michelle loves
people.
I just like people.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what Andre was trying to say. Were you excited because I'm a Black person and you just want to know a Black person's life, or did you want to know me? Right. And I think getting the intention right, I think it comes off in the way that you approach people.
Just kind of to add to that, and I was reacting to what Todd and Andre were saying about when Todd was curious when he started rooming with you and wanted to get to know you, and your reaction was, he was excited. Why? Because there was a Black person. And then I thought, well, so what? Can't I want to know somebody who's different than me and be excited about it? Maybe it'll work out and we could be friends, and maybe not. But what's wrong with that?
Sure.
Answer it, Felicia. Answer it.
Good question. Yeah.
White gaze is a real thing.
What does that mean?
White gaze is a real thing.
What does that mean? What does that mean?
Yes, I'm going to expound on that.
Yeah.
So the idea that in a dehumanizing way, white people's curiosity is around the seeing you as other and different. So it's not a curiosity. It's the question happens for us is, are you curious about me because you don't know any Black people. I'm the first or maybe the second Black person. But now we're going to live in the same space. So you get to have an intimacy around me that you've never had before. And it is really about, ooh, how do Black people really live? I'm going to find out the truth now because, I've heard things about this like proverbial cookout and like, are you going to tell me all the Black secrets? Like there's this idea that white people look at us like animals in cages and their curiosity is no different than you going to the San Diego Zoo.
See,
And
but
so, and whether that's, so that may not be true for you, but the whole thing with wanting to touch my hair, wanting to pet me, wanting to see, the differences, like you're just trying to see the difference. And that's curious for you because again, you're different from me, you're other. There's a lack of humanity in that type of curiosity, or at least that's how it feels. And that may not be the intention, but that's how it feels. So there's a difference between intention and impact. And so Andre's feeling is valid because there's been times in his life where, especially when K through 12, where you happen upon a white kid for whatever reason, whether it's UIL, whether it's, and you've been taught all these things. So mind you, we've been taught things, y'all have been taught things. Whether those things are true or not, most of it's not, right? Or it doesn't hold true for everybody. It's all based in these stereotypes and one-off experiences. And so you meet this white kid and they're telling you, and I'll never forget, there was a time where I went to a competition and we were from Texas. These kids were from California. And they were like, so do y'all ride horses to school? So it wasn't about like, hey, how do you get to school? Do your parents take you to school? Like a construct we know is normal. It was this whole, oh, y'all ride horses to school? Do y'all have outhouses? Like this was in the 90s. Like what? We're like looking at them like, no, we have cars and televisions just like you do, right? But this is the same type of thing. That's a fun way of trying to explain it. But when it comes to race, the same thing happens. It's like, so is it true that your member is bigger? like just this trying to see if the stereotypes are true, trying to just know about the differences, that feels dehumanizing.
And a lot of Black people just choose not to engage white folks. That's why I commended Michelle, because she opened herself up for a learning, for another person to learn. Because I know Black people who just would have shut down, but call me when your parents are gone and then we'll hang out.
Yeah, it takes a maturity and a lot of grace, especially, I'm assuming, Michelle, maybe you were in your early 20s because you were in the military.
I was 18.
Oh, that takes a lot of maturity and a lot of grace. I'm gonna tell you, at 18, I probably would have said something very rude because I didn't know any better, and we wouldn't have been friends anymore.
Marietta, if you want to, I'd love to know when you were listening to Michelle talk about her military experience. It just struck me that your background's from Indiana, as you shared. She was connecting with someone from Indiana. Did it strike, how did you feel, or what did you think hearing that story as it relates to connection? I would love to hear how you received that.
Oh my gosh, the light bulbs just went off. It's like, I know exactly what you're talking about because all of my experiences growing up there. But once again, that's a bit of a stereotype because anytime you take the breadth of experience and boil it down into something that's simple enough to remember, and then it becomes ingrained in your head, and then you think all people from that area are like that. But no, I do understand because, and it gets down to something else that we, and I'll go into the part about patterns and stereotypes. We interpret this complex world. It's hard to deal with all the complexity that's out there. So the way we deal with that often is by subconsciously looking at the patterns that we observe or experience in our own lives. And that often helps us shape preconceived notions about how things are or how things are going to be. Well, anytime you boil things down from complexity into simplicity, it can really go awry, because it limits what you're able to expect, or what you're able to do or to understand.
And how did you see that happening where you grew up? How did you see that happening with regard to race? What were the patterns? Where did, how were they observed, right? Can you share a little bit about the perspective you understand, from Michelle's story?
Yeah. Okay. So I grew up in a small town in Indiana, and I think there were probably 3 people of color in my high school. I had never met a Jewish person. I'd never met an Asian person. I don't even know if I'd met a Hispanic person until I went away to college, which opened all kinds of doors for me. But the people that were in our milieu were, they were well respected because they were individually known. So it was a known quantity. One of them was the class president, things like that. So if you get to know someone on an individual level in that kind of an area, then you're comfortable with them. But we played basketball, and when we advanced in basketball, and we ended up playing with some teams from other areas of the Indianapolis region, the high schools were predominantly African-American probably, and the players were much taller. That's a stereotype, but it was very true. And so they were intimidating. And if we would go there, we would, maybe be a little afraid. People would definitely self-segregate. They wouldn't mix, not just because they were from different high schools, but they were from different social, economic, and racial and cultural milieu. So I get it. And it was sad to me at the time, but I didn't understand that sadness until I went to college, and we had people from everywhere. And then I ended up living in Los Angeles, where when my kids went to first grade, there were 22 languages spoken in the homes of the children in my kids' first grade classes. And I was thrilled with that, because some people love that comfort, that known quantity of living in a small town where you know everybody and everybody knows you and everything you do. But other people feel restricted and bored, and that was me. So I don't know if that answers your question, but it gives you a little bit of my perspective.
I was just wondering how it struck you, but you can kind of, if you want to answer kind of Andre's question of, first of all, what are the fears that you think keep people back from from connecting across these self-segregated lines, and what are we to do with this?
Well, once again, it's fear of rejection and fear of being misunderstood. Much as Randy experienced that misunderstanding, maybe I'm afraid of saying something that someone will interpret in a way that's totally different from my intentions and my thoughts. So you're afraid of that. Plus, you have this humility, which is a positive from a faith perspective. You want to have some humility, but that humility also makes you think, well, they'd rather be talking with someone else, right? So that's a bit of it too.
Yeah, and it's first the thought I had when you said I felt that sadness, and I was like, that was your soul knowing this is wrong. That is your soul saying something's wrong with this setup, right? Like, why can't we go play basketball? It's a game. It's supposed to be fun. And why can't we all be together and have fun? And why is there this invisible barrier that I see it? I physically see it with my eyes, but I don't understand it. And that sadness is the soul saying, this is wrong.
Marietta's response to all of this.
I'm just bursting with wanting to say thank you, because your idea of saying a prayer before you enter that space and focusing on, what God wants you to do and relating to people, that's tremendously helpful. And the other part of it is listening to what you said made me realize that instead of focusing on my fear of what are people thinking about me and how are they going to react to what I do, if I did what I'm supposed to do, which is to think about them and how are they feeling about, interacting with people. One-on-one, I would not have a problem talking with anybody. We go to lunch, we go, walking down the corridor together, sharing hymnals, whatever it is. One-on-one, but it's being in a group of people and thinking, this person sitting next to me would rather talk to their neighbor than to talk to me. Well, how do I know that? I don't know that. Why would I assume that? Why not assume that maybe they want to know who I am and why I'm here and how I got there and who do I know in the choir and how, what kind of musical, right? So just stop that fear and those roadblocks.
And maybe they're feeling exactly how you're feeling.
Yeah.
And maybe that's why they're being quiet and you're being quiet and y'all both feeling like, I should say hi. I don't know.
And you're missing out on connection.
Right.
But I want to ask both of you, Marietta and Felicia, because this is, I feel, applicable to everyone in the world who will see this, right?
Yeah.
How do you, and then also Marietta had a question about stereotypes that I want to tie in. How do you get away from the exact thing that you guys are talking about? We're both in our own inner worlds, even though we want to expand and create a world together. And how do we shut down the cultural voices in our head that can sometimes manifest as stereotypes? And then the social anxiety that comes along with meeting a new person. This was Todd's whole impetus for even wanting to start this show. How do we get people who don't know each other to connect across what they have in common to create something meaningful?
Thank you for watching this episode of Healing Race, and stay with us for a scene from our next video.
If you want to see more conversations like the one you just watched, please subscribe to our channel, share this video with friends and family, and like and comment on the video below.
If you'd like to be a guest on one of our episodes and have an open, real conversation about race, email us at guests@healingraceshow.com.
And if there are topics you think we should cover, we'd love to hear them. So please email your ideas to topics@healingraceshow.com.
As always, thanks for your support. We look forward to continuing the conversation with you. Now, here's a scene from our next Healing Race.
Again, this is a human crying out to see me. And so when you as a white person may not feel that the world is centered around you, but as Black people, I feel like the world is centered around you. I live in this construct of racism as a white woman of a particular age at that time. And I go to this church, and this is the community that I feel safe. And I know what it is because this is how we are, and everybody's agreed to it as a society. And if I break this protocol, if I'm the one that breaks protocol, now I have to deal with the aftermath of that. I have to deal with the criticism. I have to deal with, so I am afraid. And that's to give the benefit of the doubt. Now, also, you are upholding racism when you make that choice.
To watch the rest of that episode, go ahead and click the video below me.
To see a different compelling Healing Race episode, you can click the video below me. We look forward to seeing you in the next video.